Today we are talking all about the fake essential oils, all about the fake essential oils. This episode covers two things: fake essential oils and the forgeries of Lee Israel. I'm going to be reviewing Can You Ever Forgive Me by Lee Israel, and then we're going to talk about those claims that you see online that you can make your own essential oils at home. Spoiler alert, they're not real essential oils. If you want to find out why I absolutely hated this book and why it's almost impossible to make your own essential oils at home, stick around. Welcome back to the Basement Book Drop. I'm Rutherford Rankin, and today's episode is about a lot of fake things. So first we're going to review Can You Ever Forgive Me, which is a memoir about this literary forger. And then we're going to talk about those claims that you can save a ton of money by making your own essential oils at home. You really can't. I mean, you can, but it's complicated. So we'll get into that a little bit later. I just finished reading this book. It's called Can You Ever Forgive Me? Memoirs of a Literary Forger, and it's by Lee Israel. So the title poses a question: can you ever forgive me? And I just like to say, after reading it, my answer to that question is no. I can't forgive you for writing such a terrible book, and I can't forgive you for the things that you did because you don't really show a whole lot of remorse for them. So just to give you a little bit of background on this book, it is based on a true story. It's memoirs of the writer, Lee Israel. Lee Israel was an author from New York City, and she actually had some pretty moderate success in the 60s and 70s. She had a few books that did really well. One of them was even on the New York Times bestseller list. She wrote a lot of articles for really prominent magazines like Esquire, and she did a lot of celebrity interviews at that time. So she had this pretty good career, and then in the late 80s, early 90s, her career kind of tanked. Now, she makes a lot of excuses in the book for why that happened, but based on my reading, it appears to me that she was just kind of lazy, she was not a great communicator, and she was pretty narcissistic. And so it's hard to work with people when you have that kind of a personality. So when her career tanked, she was really struggling financially because she didn't have a whole lot of work, and she actually owed some publishers money back because she was paid in advance on a book that she never finished, and so she was trying to repay that back. So she does talk about the fact that while she was struggling financially, she really could have gone out and got a normal average office job, and she actually did try that a few times. But she says she wasn't cut out for that type of work. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was struggling financially to pay my rent, to keep up with my bills, and in the case of this author, to save my cat's life because she had a pretty outrageous vet bill that she had to pay, if a job was available, then you take it. Now, maybe some people aren't like that, but that's how I am. If I was struggling to put food on my table, keep myself fed and clothed and in shelter, I would go out and get the job that I can get at the time. She didn't do that. So at this time, she actually does get a small writing assignment, and it's a biography of, I can't remember what celebrity it is, but she's writing this biography about a celebrity for a magazine piece. So she goes to this performing arts library that houses a lot of old letters and communications from celebrities, and while she's doing research, she realizes that these libraries have a lot of pieces in their collection that would be very, very valuable to autograph and memorabilia dealers. And if she could just get those out of the library, then she could make a ton of money by selling them. Now, she's not quite ready to just outright steal them. So instead, she goes and buys a secondhand typewriter, this antique typewriter, and she starts making forgeries of these letters that she's going to try to pass off to autograph dealers as authentic. She does a pretty good job of it because the first group of letters that she does are supposed to be written by Dorothy Parker. And she even has some stationery made that looks like it's Dorothy Parker's stationery. And she takes it to an autograph dealer and she's able to sell it. She comes up with this whole backstory on how she came to own these letters. She invents this Uncle Sidney that left her all of these letters and this whole collection of memorabilia that she wants to sell. She ends up not needing to use that story because the autograph dealers don't really care where you got the letters. They just need them to sell. So this kind of leads her down the path of moving on besides Dorothy Parker, she starts writing letters from Noel Coward, just tons of celebrities. And she realizes that it's hard to keep up with that. She keeps having to go and buy new typewriters because each author of these letters kind of used a different type of typewriter. It's starting to get expensive. She's selling these forgeries and she has to go out and buy the equipment to make it. So she gets this idea that if she could make forgeries of letters that actually exist in these libraries, she can take them with her when she's doing research. She can swap out her forgery for the actual real original letter in the folder, and if she can just sneak them out, then she can take the original and she can get a lot more money for it. So then she starts doing that. So she steals these letters, swaps them out from all of these performing arts libraries that have these amazing collections, and she doesn't really initially get caught. She's pretty good at swapping them out, not getting caught by the library staff and library security, but there are a couple of close calls. And I guess some of the autograph and memorabilia dealers start to kind of pick up that something's not right with what she's doing, and she realizes that it's going to be tough for her to keep selling these letters if she doesn't use some sort of intermediary. So she has this friend who had been in prison. He just got released, and she coerces him into helping her with this scheme. She's going to pay him half of whatever she gets for these letters if he'll just go to the dealers and do the selling. So they carry on with this. Eventually, like all good crime stories, she gets caught. And the problem is that she's not necessarily caught for all of her crimes. The only crime that they can really charge her with is a federal crime, which is a felony, and that was transporting stolen goods across state lines. So she ends up going to court, she pleads guilty, and the thing that really ticked me off about this story is she ends up getting 6 months of house arrest. It wasn't even real house arrest because she didn't have an ankle monitoring bracelet because she couldn't afford home phone service. So she was on house arrest, and the only thing that they could do to check up on her was they would send these Department of Corrections people to go check up on her every day, just to make sure she was there. The thing that bothers me so much about this book, besides the fact that it was written pretty terribly, the fact that the character that I thought I was going to eventually have a moment where that character had this catharsis and realized that what they did was wrong and they had remorse over it, that never happened in this book. I was shocked because I was waiting and waiting and waiting for her to say, and then that's when I realized how much bad I did to people, how many times I ripped off these libraries who had these amazing collections they were trying to maintain, and how many of these dealers spent money on these fake letters. She never did that. This book was more about her bragging about what a great job she did at making these forgeries and selling them. I was so livid by the end of it that I wanted to tear this book in half because it made me so angry. The other thing too is just her narcissism. At the point where she was under house arrest, one of the Department of Corrections people that came to check on her refused to call her anything besides her first name. He called her Lee. And that upset her so much that she called and had this person reprimanded by their supervisor because they refused to call her Miss Israel. I don't get it. If you're in prison, the guards are going to address you how they address you, and you're just going to have to accept it. Now, I'm all for respect, but the guy wasn't calling her names. He was calling her Lee, which is her name. So the amount of narcissism in this book just drove me crazy. The other thing was the quality of writing. I don't know how this writer had such success before, but this book was not a successful one. I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with a toddler where they are telling you a story and they say, oh, and then this one time I did this. And then they move on to another subject. And then this one time I did this. That's what this book was like. It was very short chapters of 2 to 3 pages, and it was one story just moving on to the next with no transition between them. The vocabulary in this book was really odd too. I think she was just trying to prove what a big vocabulary she actually has, because she tried to use every big word she do, And it became apparent that she wrote it one way and then went back through and tried to find ways to use these ostentatious words. I just used a big word. Just like her. So I don't know, that bothered me because it made it less conversational, which is what a memoir typically is, and more like she was just trying to say she's better than us because she knows all of these great words. So I don't know, like this book was really bad. I don't often say that I hate a book, but I really hated this book. I bought this book at Dollar Tree for $1. After reading it, I understand now why it was at Dollar Tree and why it's only $1. For this book, I'm not even putting a link in the description to Amazon for you to buy this. I'm sorry, but I cannot condone it, giving this book to anyone else. I'm not even sure what to do with this book. I don't know whether I should just put it on my shelf and hope that I forget about it and just use it as a nice decoration. But then I feel like I'm gonna see the cover and I'm gonna be reminded what a horrible book it was. So I actually think I might find some kind of craft project that takes the pages of books and makes something out of them, and I'm just gonna tear this book to shreds. I don't even want to put it in the recycling bin because I'm afraid the trash pickup people will see it and say, oh, a book, and they'll take it and read it. I don't want anybody to read this book. So don't read this book. Now this book was made into a movie in 2018 that stars Melissa McCarthy as the main character. I kind of want to watch it just to see if it's as bad as the book. The fact that I've never heard of this movie and I love Melissa McCarthy kind of leads me to believe it's probably not great. And I don't even know how you would translate this book into a movie. It's that bad. So, can you ever forgive me? I'm sorry, but no, I can't forgive you for writing this book. It was bad. So that book review got me pretty flustered. And another thing that really gets me flustered is misinformation. Whether it's politics or the COVID pandemic, anything where people are spreading misinformation or disinformation around the internet or telling you things that are just rumors and gossip and they're not true, that bugs me so much. Just check the facts, people. It is not that hard in this day and age to do your own research and figure it out. And if you see something on Facebook, doesn't mean it's true. Anybody can post what they want on Facebook. So I don't mean to sound like I'm going on rants today, but recently I was on YouTube and I think I was searching something about essential oils. And I saw this video that's playing behind me. And this lady claims that she is making essential oils at home. So what she's doing is she puts a pot on the stove. She has a lilac bush in her yard. She fills that pot up with grapeseed oil. She goes out and cuts a bunch of blossoms off of her lilac bush, and she proceeds to cook them in this grapeseed oil for several hours at low heat. And then she claims that she's making essential oils because she's tired of paying $9 for a bottle of lilac oil. Those aren't essential oils. So here's the problem. There are really two methods for extracting essential oils from plants. And those two methods are either distillation or extraction, which sometimes extraction is called cold pressing. Those two ways actually break down the cells of the plant and release the essential oil. Putting lilac blossoms, or even something like eucalyptus leaves or something, in oil and simmering it for a couple of hours, that isn't gonna work. All you're doing is releasing some of the fragrance from those plants into the oil, and you're really just making aromatic oils. Even if you were somehow able to get the essential oils extracted that way, it's gonna be so diluted in that oil that you're doing it in that it's not even really probably gonna work that way. So the thing is, if you want a fragrance oil, if that's what you're looking for, then the method that she uses, that's fine for making a fragrance oil. I wouldn't apply it topically. I wouldn't really use it for anything other than putting in maybe one of those little potpourri dispenser things that looks like a little mini crock pot that you used to get in the 90s for potpourri oil. That's really all you're gonna be able to use that for. You won't get the health benefits and that type of thing from it. So if you're looking for aromatic oils and how to make those at home, yeah, her method is great. Now, if you are interested in truly making your own essential oils at home, you could The problem is that you're going to invest so much in the equipment to do so that it's really not going to be financially feasible for you to do that. You might as well just buy oils from an oil distributor who has a good reputation and high quality oils. I actually did find this video, and this is a guy who is truly making essential oils at home. Now, the process that he uses scares me a little bit because he does use a pressure cooker, not like an Instant Pot pressure cooker, the old-fashioned pressure cooker where you have to screw down the lid. And he also sets up a condenser, and he has a line running from his pressure cooker over through the condenser to actually cool those off so that he could separate out the oil and the water. So this video, he really is making essential oils at home because he's doing the same process for distillation that an essential oil manufacturer is going to do. Now, as far as the quality of his oil, I'm not really sure about that. I mean, the equipment that he's using is just equipment he had around the house. I'm not sure about putting it through the copper pipe and that sort of thing. So if that's something you're interested in and you want to buy the equipment or make the equipment and go through an awful lot of work to get very little oil, go ahead, but just know that you're not going to get as pure or concentrated oil as you would from a distributor like doTERRA. So just something to keep in mind. If you're like a DIY type person and you just like doing that kind of stuff as a hobby, yeah, build a distiller and distill your own essential oils, but just know that they're not going to be the same quality. So as I mentioned before, there's really two main methods that essential oil manufacturers use to extract those oils out of the plants. And those two methods are distillation and extraction or cold pressing. Now, the method that's used kind of depends on what the plant is. So if you're trying to extract oils out of something that's leafy, like eucalyptus or peppermint or spearmint or something like that, you would be doing distillation because that's the method that you need to do to break down those cells. If you have something that's like a citrus where you're trying to get the oil out of that rind, you would probably use extraction or cold pressing because you need to somehow break up that rind and get the oil out of it. So I kind of want to show you why throwing a bunch of leaves into hot simmering oil for several hours doesn't do the same thing that distillation and cold pressing does. So I want to kind of go through the process with you. So let's take a quick look at what the process looks like for distillation and extraction. A distillation system is basically composed of 4 parts: a boiler, a pressure tank, a condenser, and an oil separator. So the plants are harvested and the leaves are gathered. And those leaves are placed inside of the pressure tank. And then that gets sealed up. The boiler then fires up, and the water that's in that boiler gets converted to steam, which flows through the piping into the pressure tank. Now, as that steam flows over those plants, it actually breaks apart the plant cells. And within those plant cells is the essential oil and the water that's within that plant. That gets carried through the pipe and over to the condenser. The condenser is basically just a cooler, and it's called a condenser because it takes that steam and it condenses it back into water and oil. Now, once it goes through the condenser, it goes over to the oil separator. In the oil separator, there's a bottom layer of water and a top layer of oil. So that gives them the option to separate those out. So the oil goes into one bucket, and then the hydrosol or the floral water goes into another. Some oils, like citrus oils, they can actually be ruined by distillation methods. So in those cases, expression or cold pressing is used. The machinery for cold pressing is pretty simple. It's just an expression machine that's basically like a giant rasp or kind of like a cheese grater, and the entire fruit is put in there, and as it tumbles around in there, it's sprayed with water, and that starts to break down the rind. And as the rind breaks down, the cells open up and they actually release the oil. And as that happens, when it's sprayed with water, that water gets carried over to a centrifuge. The point of the centrifuge is to apply centrifugal force, which pushes the oil out to the edge, and it separates it from any water or fruit particles that might be in there. And as that turns and the oil is pressed on the outside, it gets sent through that spout, and then it's gathered in a bin or a tank or whatever container they're using to gather that oil. So as you can see, producing essential oils is a pretty complicated process. It is not just throwing some leaves into hot oil and waiting for it to simmer down after a few hours. That's not going to break down those plant cells and release the essential oil the way that distillation and extraction does. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is purity and quality. The processes that reputable essential oil manufacturers go through to prove and test the purity and quality of their products is not something you're going to be able to do at home. And if you're ingesting that oil, if you're using it topically, or if you're inhaling it from a diffuser, I don't know about you, but I want to make sure that those are quality products. So just keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, a lot of people get concerned when they see the price of essential oils for a 15 milliliter bottle. The thing is, you have to understand that there were probably several batches that they had to go through just to get that amount of oil for that 15 milliliter bottle. So when you think about all the stuff that went into it, all of the raw peppermint that went into that batch to make that peppermint and how many batches they had to do just to get you that 15 milliliters, that price is really not so bad. And the fact that you're getting a quality, pure product from a reputable essential oil manufacturer should give you some comfort. So that is it for today's episode of the Basement Book Drop. I feel like this episode was kind of negative and I got a little flustered about it. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody over that. I just want you to know that if I read a book and it really is not a good book, I'm going to give it an honest review, and this book really was bad. It is not worth $1 at Dollar Tree. Don't buy it, don't read it. I also hope that you enjoyed the educational moment and that you learned something about how essential oils are made that you didn't know before. You know, for some people it might be a refresher, but hopefully you got something out of it. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. And if this is something that you like hearing about, you like book reviews, like essential oil related topics, give me a follow, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and stay you. We will catch you on the next episode of the Basement Book Drop.